All right, Faithful. I am so excited to have back on Bad Faith podcast again, Kate Willett. You know her, you love her as an amazing comedian. Also, you should be very well aware that her special Loopholes just came out April 23rd on Prime Video, Apple TV, YouTube, and other platforms. You have seen her on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, Netflix's comedy lineup, and on and on and on. Kate, I'm endlessly impressed by you. We don't get many like mainstream, cool, regular stars in our midst here in the lefty podcast landscape. So I'm always grateful for you to join us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So first up, can you tell us a little bit about this special?
So yeah, it's just a straight up stand-up special, but you know, I did work some leftist themes in there. It's a lot about romance, which I know we've talked about on this show before.
You're alluding, of course, to the fact that you were part of one of our famous Dating on the Left episodes.
Yeah, that caused a lot of controversy. I was getting people in my mentions for weeks, you know.
Did it really? What were they saying to you?
I don't remember. I mean, I don't totally remember, but it was like, I feel like it was kind of like a lot of like guys being like, you know, arguing over like if what we were saying was reasonable, of like, you know, they have a right to deserve that, like, or versus like not all men. I don't know. It was just dudes being dudes. But you know, this special, it's 45 minutes of stand-up. It's a lot about like the kind of like various pressures that I feel like are part of life as a woman, like pressure, you know, from like one side to be, you know, like A+ trad wife or whatever. And then, you know, also like, you know, pressure to be like a, you know, feminist girl boss, killing it in every way, and to also be like very sexy. And, you know, I called it Loopholes because I feel like it's about, you know, like finding the room within all that stuff to just like be yourself, you know?
Well, where is that? Because I've noticed when we talked, I feel like on the podcast about dating, I remember you bringing up polyamory and how many people kind of in your dating world were wanting a polyamorous relationship. And I confess, I think a little older and a little squarer, and that hadn't been my dating experience. But I feel like since we had that conversation, polyamory is everywhere. There was that famous New York Magazine cover that set a lot of people off. I know that Sagar and Jetty over at Breaking Point had a lot to say about it. And there's been obviously this explosion on the other side of things of the trad wife phenomenon on TikTok. I saw that Nathan Robinson over at Current Affairs just covered a story of a trad wife who, like, I guess went into remission. I don't know what you call it, but she basically has rejected the lifestyle. I don't know. She's untraded herself when she found out that it was kind of like a coercive, abusive situation. So, I mean, what do you make of the kind of, I don't know, maybe growing mainstreaming of polyamory and like kind of this competing trad stuff on the other side?
I'm glad you asked me this question because I've thought a lot about it. I am politically on the left, but I am sexually in the center. I am a sexual centrist. And I feel like Gen Z, I don't know. I mean, based on like the people that I know and like what I see on TikTok, like I feel like people feel this enormous pressure to like either be like a stay-at-home wife or, you know, be like the queen of like polyamory and BDSM. And like, if you want to do those things, totally fine. But I just want to remind people that there's an option here to just like find a person you like, do it with them. And there's like nothing wrong with that either, which it's actually like the option that most people choose. And it's a totally fine one. It's one that I'm living that boring lifestyle. Yeah. And it works for me.
It was kind of weird. What felt weird was how, you know, it doesn't feel to me, and maybe I'm wrong, I completely acknowledge that I'm in my bubble, but it didn't feel to me like there's been some radical shift, at least in my generational cohort of elder millennials, about what the expectations are for dating. I mean, it was always that our generation was the first, you know, like hookup generation. But compared to Gen Zs, when I talk to my younger cousins and stuff, it feels like we're basically traditional. Like it feels like when I talk to younger people, they're almost apologetic about the notion of like liking someone and like wanting to be in a relationship at all. So I'm feeling pretty traditional these days. And so then when an article comes along like that cover story at New York Mag, and we're in the middle of a discourse about how like millennials and younger are like everyone's polyamorous, and then you have more conservative minded people saying, and this is what's wrong with society, and this is why we can't listen to the left. I felt a little like I'm not trying to throw polyamory under the bus, but it does feel like a kind of manufactured crisis of sorts.
Yeah, I think that most people are just being basic still, I think that is definitely predominant. I do feel like whenever there's like a lot of stuff in the news, they try to like manufacture like a culture war crisis, and they were really trying to see if they could get it going, and like, like the like mini polyamory articles. There was like probably 12 in a row or something like that. And like, I feel like they got a lot of discussion and attention. And it's like, if people want to do that, that's awesome. It's probably not going to be the right thing for most people. I do think it's really popular. I think that like part of the reason you and me have had a different experience, most likely, is because I think that this stuff is definitely bigger on the West Coast. The like kind of like, sexual, like many partners, just the kind of like, I don't know, the free love lifestyle, like the like tradition of like, leftist communities, I guess, like in San Francisco, Northern California. It just like feels a little bit more like people doing like a lot of lifestyle experimentation as well. And that part of it has also been kind of co-opted by like the tech bro, like Burning Man type people, like the what's that lady's name? Ella? I don't know. The weird libertarian lady. Let's call her the weird libertarian lady.
Okay.
Whereas like I feel like in New York, where I live now, there's so many people that like, like for them, like socialism is like knocking doors, like, rather than like having sex with a lot of people. And I have to say that I personally feel more comfortable in this environment because I am a little boring, and I just want to canvas. I don't want to hook up with some weird guy with long hair. I don't know. So, yeah.
Okay, I wouldn't call you boring. I mean, for a couple of reasons. One, I got to say up front that I've really appreciated how sort of grounded in humanist and, I don't know, just compassionate your Twitter feed has been. I know that we're talking about you being a comedian, and you're also obviously very funny, but in the midst of the kind of political milieu we're both in, I see you so consistently and so kind of in a no frills, matter of fact way, just tweeting about the humanitarian situation in Gaza and, doggedly just focused on left issues in a way that I think constantly reminds me to gut check my humanity and to not take the visceral imagery that we're seeing for granted. And I just want to thank you for that and for being such a strong voice on the left and your advocacy for Palestine. But then to also ask you, as a comedian who also is on the left and on the left on that particular issue, if you might weigh in on a couple of comedians that have been caught in the crosshairs of this recently. Yeah, so I think the biggest one is probably the Bill versus Bill head-to-head, Bill Maher versus Bill Burr on the Bill Maher Basement podcast.
The Basement podcast?
I'm sure it has a name. I think it's called Club Maher or something like that.
I don't know what it's called, but I did see the clip. I did see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
With the kids demonstrating for Hamas, they are in with the terrorists.
They were for the Palestinians.
Well, it's sort of the same cause. Why, are you?
I'm on the side of the kids.
Yeah, that's easy to say. No one wants to see kids dead. This is a war.
That was very brave of you to say that.
This is a war. No, I'm the one who's actually brave on this.
Pat yourself on the back.
It's easy to say I'm for the kids. Who's not for the kids?
Well,
it comes down to real hard-nosed decisions. Like a country.
Stop talking like you're a general.
A country got attacked. Israel got attacked.
I'm not saying that they didn't have a right to go back. I'm just sitting there going like, how do I look at
We're the only country in the world that they get attacked, and then as soon as they counterattack, it's like, well, we got to stop this shit now. Don't attack them. There's a very simple solution to all this problem in the Middle East. Stop attacking Israel.
Hey, you
Stop
just solved
attacking
it.
Israel.
You just solved it.
I actually did.
There you go. That's fantastic.
Anyway.
All right.
We don't need to get onto that.
Let's go to Russia and the Ukraine. How do you solve that one, Bill? Let me hear your hard-nosed decision about that. Well, let me ask you a question. How is war still legal? With all this shit that's been canceled.
Legal.
Why is that still fucking legal?
Would you like a real answer to that? Because for something to be illegal, you have to have the capacity to enforce it. And you can't enforce against war, or else you have to go to war with the country that's going to war. And we don't want to go to war with Russia over Ukraine. What would be the sense of making it illegal? Oh, that's really going to stop Putin. No. To stop people from going to war, you have to also put boots.
You can't sit down and talk it out. Why can't Putin do a podcast with the head guy? Like, you just solved the Middle East on a podcast. Why can't they solve what they're doing on a podcast?
This is why this is not your thing.
Make some hard-nosed decisions. It's not your thing. It's what you.
It is my thing.
It isn't your thing.
This is not your thing.
You're like that guy that has a fantasy football team and thinks he's a fucking GM.
No.
That's exactly what it is. Like, why am I fucking listening to you like you've done something? What have you done?
So Bill Maher is one of these people who has been making this argument along with Seinfeld that it's so tough to be funny these days because of woke. He sat down with Bill Burr, who I would argue is one of the more consistently funny. Bill Burr, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think Bill Burr is that weird Trump guy, right? I think, yeah.
Did I say Bill Burr? Not attorney Bill Burr. Bill Burr, the redheaded comedian. You know, who kind of, it seems to me his very existence sort of disproves the premise. But what did you make of that exchange?
You know, I feel like Bill Burr, has a lot of times, he just has such better opinions than you would think that a guy who looks like that and talks like that would have. He has very compassionate opinions a lot of the time. You know, someone's gonna find some old thing and be like, whatever. If you found a counterexample to that, that's probably not what I mean. I'm just talking about the stuff that I've seen. I feel like he, just has very compassionate politics and just does not tend to take the bait on that culture war stuff, woke versus, edgelord or whatever. But it was just, when I was watching that clip, Bill Maher was trying so hard to, paint these protests and these kind of ridiculous, the terms that we've seen, pro-Hamas, the students are protesting for Hamas, and then Bill Burr just says, I'm with the kids. And then Bill Maher is just oh, that's easy to say. And then starts talking about how we actually Israel needs to kill the kids, which isn't even what Bill Burr meant. Bill Maher just voluntarily admitted that he supports that for literally no reason, and to me it was just it's a very sort of concrete representation of normal person who versus total media brain, Yeah,
it was interesting because Bill Maher seemed to be really fixated on the fact that Bill Burr, admittedly, he would admit it himself, is no expert on the issue, but he's not pretending to be. Bill Maher, on the other hand, very much is without, he's someone who's been clowned repeatedly by various folks from, Glenn Greenwald all the way on down about this particular issue.
It's not our fault what came out. We didn't go into Egypt.
Well, we
wound up with the Muslim Brotherhood.
We didn't go into Egypt. We were supporting and propping up Mubarak for 30 years, even as we were cheering for all the Tahrir Square demonstrators as though we were on their side. It was our government that kept Mubarak in power, just like we've done across the entire Muslim world. And it's amazing for you to say that, well, look at all these Muslims. The minute you give them a little bit of freedom, they go wild and they start being all violent. How can you be a citizen of the United States, the country that has generated more violence and militarism in the world over the last 5 or 6 decades, and say, look at those people over there, they are incredibly violent? We play a significant role in what has been happening in the Middle East because we've been interfering and dominating that region in order to have access to their oil.
I wasn't talking about violence. I was talking about theocracy. That doesn't happen here.
No, well, okay, that doesn't happen here, but at the same time, Iran isn't invading lots of other countries and occupying them for a decade, nor are fundamentalist Muslim countries the way the United States is. So these things are interlinked because we are continuously interfering in that part of the world. And so to say...
Really, it's all our fault?
It's not all our fault, but when you send your military for 6 straight decades into other countries to bomb them, kill their children and women and innocent men, prop up dictators, yeah, you take responsibility for your actions and say, to the extent that that region...
That religion goes back 1,000 years before our revolution, so I don't think we can take all the blame.
I don't think we should. I think we should take a lot of it. And there's lots of bodies and corpses that have been piled up in the name of Christianity and Judaism as well.
Not recently.
Have you heard of the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza for the last 50 years, motivated in part by extremist views of Judaism, or the wars in Europe, or the fact that there were generals in the United States saying we have to go and invade and destroy Iraq, a country of 26 million people, because our God is bigger? Lots of religions, not just Islam, produce violence.
Well, if I could just make one quick point about Egypt.
That silly liberal view that all religions are alike, because it makes you feel good.
No, it makes you feel good to say our side is better. Those people over there are primitive and violent.
No, it makes you feel good to put a crown on your head and say, I'm a good person. How do I prove that?
You get to ignore the responsibility that your own government has for the violence and instability in the world by saying, look, it's that primitive religion over there that's to blame.
All right, it's time.
And as kind of sort of like uninformed and, well, I just don't think you should kill kids, you know, Bill Burr's response was Bill Maher's, as you put it, like sort of admission to jumping to, well, you have to, you know, you as many kids as it takes to defend the Jewish state, like, it was revealing in and of itself. You know, there wasn't necessarily the asymmetry of knowledge that Maher thought there was, but at the end of the day, the basic kind of normie take won the day because it comes from a gut sense that you shouldn't blow the heads off of children.
Yeah, it's very, I mean, one could say it's like the most basic rule for just how to be a person. Don't blow the heads off of children. Kind of a real baseline there. And to me, it's like, it's always a relief to like see something like that, like especially from people in my industry, because you know there's just a lot of people with, you know, I think like very violent opinions a lot of the time, and you know when you just kind of, and those opinions are foregrounded, and when you just see somebody express like something really normal and human, and just like how somebody who is not, you know, totally like, I don't even know what word I want to use here. I was gonna say brainwashed, and I do think that's kind of fair, because I think it takes kind of so much indoctrination to get to the point where you can support any kind of killing of children. Like I think that the default for us as human beings is to not support that, and that like as much as like, you know, people say these college kids are indoctrinated or whatever, the baseline is to be horrified when we see a dead child. Like that's the human baseline, and any straying from that kind of like natural horror reaction, like it takes a lot of indoctrination, actually, I think, to get to the point where you think that's okay. And all of us in the United States have it on some level, you know?
I think that's part of why you're getting the newest kind of Hasbara, the newest kind of propaganda has been happening over the course of this week, where the UN put out figures of the death toll and disaggregated the number of deceased Palestinians in Gaza who have been identified by name versus those who have yet to be identified, either because they were dug out of a mass grave, or because they were so disfigured they can't be identified, or because all of their family members have also been killed and there's nobody left to identify them, right? And so many outlets, so many individuals, from Joe Scarborough to Fox News, ran with this headline of Hamas numbers were wrong, UN revises numbers down. Now, a lot of that has been pulled back, but after other outlets corrected that non-story and said, well, they haven't actually revised the numbers down. They're just saying that some people, we don't know their names yet. The New York Times came out hours after the revisions with their own version of the story, in which they doubled down, saying UN lowers count of women and children killed, citing incomplete information. And I've noticed that in my mentions and in the comment section on the Hill, which is largely sympathetic, frankly, to Palestine, there are people who have run with that narrative. And it seems to me that it's no accident that that narrative is rising at a time when the kind of imagery and the scale of the horror in Gaza is so difficult to avoid. It seems to me like they know that they can't argue. They've kind of reached the limits of arguing like it's okay to kill the children. Now they have to say, well, it's not that many children.
Yeah, I've noticed that too, that there, have been like many cycles of Hasbro on this one. And, even some people saying like, they'll say like it's not as bad as the Rwanda genocide, like kind of implicitly admitting that it is a genocide. Like they're not even saying it's not anymore in some cases. But yeah, no, I saw the whole kind of journey of this story from like the Jerusalem Post headline. Like the UN, figure is they've cut it by half to like, the sort of professional, or maybe even volunteer propagandists like Eve Barlow or something, to kind of make it sort of down the line to just, regular people being confused to like, getting in like the New York Times, like this major source, and like Morning Joe. And it's just so frustrating because it's like this thing that's just like, you're like screaming at it. You're like, no, that is not true. Like, they did not cut the figure in half, but it makes no difference. And then, like by the time people kind of figure it out, the UN, I think, issued a clarification statement. It's sort of like, I don't know, it's sort of too late. It's out there,
Yeah, that's a really good point about the UN coming out and making a statement disavowing the story. We should put a clip of that in.
Thanks, Farhan. There's some reporting that's come out that says, quote, the UN has halved the number of casualties.
Halved, yes. It's a hard word to say.
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about, though,
yes,
right?
I do know. Cut in half.
Cut in half, thank you. The casualties from Gaza, is that true?
It's not quite the case, no. What I can tell you is this. The overall number of fatalities that's been tallied by the Ministry of Health in Gaza, which is our counterpart on dealing with the death tolls, that number remains unchanged, and it's at more than 35,000 people since October 7th. What's changed is the Ministry of Health in Gaza has updated the breakdown of fatalities for whom full details have been documented. So what they recently published was that they gave figures for 24,686 out of 34,622 overall fatalities recorded in Gaza. And those 24,686 people are the ones for whom full details have been documented. In other words, people who have been fully identified. Out of that smaller number, that subset of identified bodies, you have 7,797 children, 4,959 women, 1,924 elderly, and 10,006 men. And the Ministry of Health says that the documentation process of fully identifying details of the casualties is ongoing. Meanwhile, as you can see if you do the math, that there's about another 10,000 plus bodies who still have to be fully identified. And so then the details of those, which of those are children, which of those are women, that will be reestablished once the full identification process is complete. Our teams in Gaza are unable to independently verify these figures, given the situation on the ground and the continuing combat and the sheer number of fatalities. And so we cite the Ministry of Health as the source for our figures.
And do you have any reason to believe that the Ministry of Health numbers are incorrect based on the years that the UN has worked with the Ministry of Health of Gaza?
Unfortunately, we have the sad experience of coordinating with the Ministry of Health on casualty figures every few years for large mass casualty incidents in Gaza. And in past times, their figures have proven to be generally accurate. Yes, Deshi.
Yeah, follow up on the incident that happened in the.
But also, I want to ask you. I mean, like Seinfeld, for example, he's out there saying, the man who hasn't really done a new version of a joke in 20 years, and arguably wasn't the funniest part of Seinfeld, as evidenced by how much more I enjoy Curb than Seinfeld. Yeah. Is saying, oh, it's just so hard to be funny.
Nothing really affects comedy. People always need it. They need it so badly. and they don't get it. It used to be you would go home at the end of the day. Most people would go, oh, Cheers is on. Oh, MASH is on. Oh, Mary Tyler Moore is on. All in the Family's on. You just expected there'll be some funny stuff we can watch on TV tonight. Well, guess what? Where is it? This is the result of the extreme left and PC crap and people worrying so much about offending other people.
Mm-hmm.
When you write a script and it goes into 4 or 5 different hands, committees, groups, here's our thought about this joke, well, that's the end of your comedy. They move the gates, like in skiing. Yeah. Culture, the gates are moving. Your job is to be agile and clever enough that wherever they put the gates, I'm going to make the gate.
You know, it's so hard to be funny these days because of woke. If anything, it feels to me like I'm listening to you, I'm reading your feed, I'm thinking about the fact that you have to go out there and be funny every day. You know, if anyone has an excuse to be struggling with what it means to be funny when you are so concerned about such a significant humanitarian crisis, it should be people on the left. But Seinfeld's out here making genuinely one of the least funny movies I've ever seen in my life.
I didn't see it.
Pop-Tart movie, Unfrosted.
Oh my God.
Like, I love to watch bad, like hate watch things. I actively enjoy hate watching things. And this had a lot of elements for a good hate watch. It has a stacked cast, and it's clearly got a lot of money put into it, and it's well like produced in terms of the sets and the costumes and makeup and hair and stuff. But truly one of the biggest wastes of time that I've ever experienced. And this is the guy with the most unfunny movie, one of the worst Netflix openings of all time, who's lecturing the left about how we've made it too hard to be funny because of woke.
Yeah. And that's a really, like, that talking point has been around for I don't know, years now. When do you think it really started? I don't know, 2016. Comedians have been talking about how, you know, wokeness is killing comedy for quite some time now. And yet, you know, there's a lot of comedians that are, you know, I would say have more right-wing politics that, you know, are working. Like a lot of the comedians on like Joe Rogan's podcast, for example, are huge. You know, I don't know, like I think that there's comedy for everyone at this point. Like there's not like it's decentralized, you know, like there's there's a person with a million followers on TikTok who is like selling out theaters and, you know, like only talking about horses, you know what I mean? Like everybody like everybody can kind of have their audience at this point. And whereas like when Jerry Seinfeld was you know, just like had his show, I think it was, you know, like there wasn't the internet and stuff, or there was internet, but you know, it was just kind of a different thing for comedy versus like all this stuff on social media. But it's like Jerry Seinfeld is still gonna like sell out wherever he performs, you know, like his show is like syndicated. It's one of the most popular shows of all time. Like he's not having any problems. So I'm not really sure what he's so
angry about.
Yeah, like he until like for the rest of his life, like if he lives to 100, he'll still be selling out theaters like when he's 100 years old, you know, like so it's like obviously he can do it, you know, he's so famous.
And able to court 17-year-olds whenever he wants. I wanted to ask you also about I mean, do you find yourself, I mean, I think your point about there being comedy for everyone and people, it can be niche and you can find your corner of the internet. I mean, do you find on a kind of an industry basis that you, the one that has frankly the more controversial perspective, the more outsider perspective, at least when it comes to kind of American empire and the State Department on this particular issue, do you feel some constraints that are kind of like not talked about because the whole kind of cancellation discourse is about what it means to say something that's too far right versus too far left?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I wake up, first of all, I'm really committed to just saying what I think is right to say, and I do it, and I don't compromise myself. And I wake up with really like intense anxiety every morning because it's like I do think you know, especially on this issue, you know, anything with criticizing what Israel is doing, you know, it does it does burn bridges, you know, like I have known people who got fired from really great jobs from that. And, you know, there are like straight up, I mean, it is just like, you know, there are people dropped by like agents and managers. And, you know, I think that, you know, anything that comes to, you know, criticism of like American foreign policy, but especially on this, you know, there is the career consequence, I think, for a lot of people, maybe in some ways less so than before, because comedians can kind of make their own audience and like make their money through like touring and their own fan base. But like, it is scary. And, you know, I guess I don't have a ton of sympathy for people who are like, what I want to do is to tell a rape joke, because it's like, you can do that. Nobody's stopping you. You're not even going to get fired from like any major jobs. And like, it's not even going to be a risk. Like you can, you know, you can
actually rape a person and you might still be able to keep your job despite the joke.
Absolutely. There's a guy
sexually assault.
No, there's a guy, Chris D'Elia, who is like he's an accused accused
from the Whitney Cummings show, and
he
was also on the first season of You, or maybe the second season of You.
I'm old. I feel bad laughing at this moment, but let me explain where I am. Like, I never expected my industry to draw the line at sexual harassment. I never expected my industry to draw the line even at sexual assault. But I thought that people probably wouldn't want to hang out with a pedophile, because who does, you know? Like, who's just like, oh my God, let's go hang out with a guy who is hooking up with teenagers right now. Not hooking up, but like, you know what I mean? Like, it's gross. It's gross.
Yeah.
And even that isn't the line. But you know, like seeing, you know, like I know about this actress that, you know, lost like a 6-year contract on a show because, you know, she was outspoken about the need for a ceasefire. And it's like, oh my God, like, why are like the decent people like paying the price when gross dudes who like want to date a high school student are not, you know?
That's incredible. I mean, you know, I'm not asking you to out this person, but, you know, I hope, you know, that people who have those kind of experiences know that, you know, there's a whole big left community that I think will give them big ups. And I think a lot of folks want to support you and other folks who are out there kind of bravely saying your truth, even when you know there's consequences. I think that's why there's such affection for people like Susan Sarandon and
she
Michael
rules.
Moore.
Yeah. Rules. And to be fair,
we're in the thick of it.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, to be fair, I think that like more and more people are like speaking out about what's happening, right? But like, you know, if you're in like private conversations with comedians, you know, and other people that work in the entertainment industry, there's way more people that think that what's happening to Gaza right now is horrible than will say so on the internet. Like, I think privately, like the vast majority of people think that this is just disgusting, atrocious, a genocide. You know, I think that like in terms of like, you know, the people like Mark Ruffalo or Susan Sarandon who are actually like, you know, saying something on a regular basis, my guess is what they're saying probably actually represents the like majority opinion, but people do not want to be it's already such a precarious industry, you know, like it's already really hard to make a living, you know?
Yeah. Well, polls would suggest you're right. I want to pivot a little bit into these disastrous polls that came out for Biden this week that show he's losing in 5 out of 6 swing states, and he's only up 2 in Michigan, the one swing state where he's winning. There's been a lot of debate about the extent to which Gaza is or is not the reason, but what we do know for sure is that an overwhelming majority, upwards of 80% of Democrats, want an immediate and permanent ceasefire, and a majority of all Americans overall want the same. Majority of Republicans, a majority of independents. There's nobody who doesn't want what's happening to stop immediately, regardless of what your sympathies are. A lot of pro-Israel people will point to the fact that the polls also demonstrate that more Americans are sympathetic to Israel than Palestine, but I think it's important to look at the shift that's happening. Polls showing that increasingly people are more sympathetic to Palestine over time than Israel, and the sympathy for Israel is the lowest lower than it has been historically. That being said, getting to the core of this debate, like how much do you think Gaza is really affecting Biden's poll numbers, especially when you look to the fact that it is his deficiencies with young voters, Black voters, and Latino voters that seem to be driving a lot of the gap that he needs to close if he hopes to defeat Donald Trump in the fall. What do you make of it all?
I mean, I don't know, because it's like you'll see like all these polls that suggest that like Gaza isn't a big factor. Harry Ensign, I think at CNN, has done some analysis suggesting it is a really big factor, like of people who say that they're less likely to vote. That's a huge reason. But I don't know, like just my sense is it affects things a lot. Like that could be very like biased because like I hang out with a lot of like anti-war left people and I live in New York, and like so I'm sure that the community that I spend my time in is somewhat of an I don't even want to say an echo chamber, because I just think it's correct. Like this is horrible, but like to me it's like Biden's victory in 2020 was a very narrow margin. And like, I think he already has the age stuff working against him. That's a very unchangeable situation. Inflation is what it is. Like, to me, to have a really good chance against Trump, like he would actively need people to like mobilize for him, and to have like young people not just like show up and vote, but to have people like reminding each other to vote, like getting their friends to vote. And it's like, I'm not going to tell anybody how to vote either way. Like I'm super like sympathetic, like especially in swing states, to people that like, are very concerned about what Trump is going to do to, trans people, abortion. Like I get it. And I'm not going to pressure anyone to vote for Joe Biden, because not supporting a genocide is like the most legitimate reason to not vote. So it's just like, to me, that's just like a personal moral decision that everybody has to make for themselves based on their considerations. But like, I don't know anyone at this point who would like feel completely comfortable like posting something really positive about Joe Biden, because it would seem so insensitive. Like it would just seem so, there are people that do it and they get like trashed because it just seems so unkind at this point, given what he's doing.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point that you're making, that it's not just about young people who are surveyed in a poll saying that they personally won't vote, but that this is the base of the Democratic Party that also mobilizes other people. I remember listening to Dr. West had a podcast with another professor in 2020 where they interviewed a bunch of young Black organizers in Georgia who had done so much work, not just to win the election, but to get those Senate seats. And they were saying immediately after the election, like, I can't do this again. Like, I've burned all my bridges. I've exhausted all my goodwill. I told folks at door after door that I had promised Biden all of these things, or that Biden had promised them all of these things. And then when it started to fall apart, the amount that people are getting, the $2,000 checks got revised down. When, student debt cancellation didn't come through, all of these things started to very quickly disintegrate before he was even inaugurated. They realized that they just weren't going to be able to turn people out. And that was even before Gaza, after which I think you're right. A lot of people would be too embarrassed to be actively, vocally advocating for Biden. And how is that going to affect his ability to turn out votes? Not just the votes themselves, but the voter turnarounders are more likely to stay at home.
Yeah, or like, or not put themselves out there like publicly,
Yeah.
Like I mean, Biden got huge youth turnout in 2020. From what I understand, I was looking at this a while back. It was some of the biggest youth turnout in a presidential election in like many years, and it was a narrow victory that he pulled off. And like, I don't want to make assumptions about people because of their ethnicity or religion, but I would guess that based on the way that Biden has talked about Gaza and what he's done there, I would expect his turnout among Muslim and Arab voters to be pretty low. Like also from what I'm seeing, like the statements of leaders of organizations and people refusing to meet with him. And I don't know, like in a state like Michigan that is, so necessary for him, where like both of those demographics, like young people and Muslim and Arab voters were just key to his 2020 victory. Like I don't see it,
Yeah, it's honestly confusing because Michigan is the one state of all the swing states where Biden is up according to polls, even though, the uncommitted campaign had its first big win there with 100,000 voters in Michigan.
Yeah.
Coming out to vote, but voting decidedly not for Joe Biden specifically because of Gaza. People who say, it's not really about Gaza. Jonathan Chait had a recent piece in New York Magazine titled basically, "Your pet issue is not why Biden is losing." And a lot of people who take that approach, they'll look at the fact that polls show young voters don't rank Gaza high on their personal priorities lists. But I think that's kind of asking the wrong question because as that New York Times poll article from Monday pointed out, if you look at the voters who say that they voted for Biden last time, but who do not plan to vote for him again, 13% of those people say that his foreign policy or the war in Gaza was the most important issue for their vote. And the overwhelming majority of that 13% are upset because they're pro-Palestine as opposed to being pro-Israel. And so when you have the margins as close as you are, 13% of the people that voted for you last time not voting for you this time is obviously enough to tank your campaign. So why is there so much indifference about changing or an unwillingness, I should say, to change course on Gaza, saying you're going to withhold these weapons shipments and then just earlier this week saying you're going to send another $1 billion of weapons to Israel at the same time when you have Human Rights Watch coming out to say, for example, there's been 8 different instances in which humanitarian organizations have shared their location with Israel and then been subsequently attacked by Israel. You have Antonio Guterres of the UN having to make another statement saying, we're so disappointed that another staffer, a DSS staffer, Department of Security's staffer at the UN was shot through the glass of his car and killed, not to mention all of the investigations into the mass graves, not to mention the failure of any follow-up on the Jose Andres drone attack. I mean, it's almost too many instances to keep up with. And we've seen that the apocryphal red line has just never manifested.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And, to the point you were making about like the people who decide not to vote, like that's the same point that like Harry Enten has been making again and again. And I totally buy that analysis. But like even beyond, this specific issue, I think that, like the strategy to get people out for Clinton, for Biden, this time for Biden again, has been like, don't you care about marginalized people? Like, don't you care about human rights for everyone? And it's like, yes, obviously I do. That's why I have voted Democrat my whole life, even though I hate a lot of these people. But that case is severely undermined when what Joe Biden is doing is, killing probably the most marginalized people in the entire world. Like, I don't think that people are going to feel guilty about deciding to stay home in this case.
It's such a sick and false choice also. I mean, I wrote a radar today on Rising about this. It ostensibly was responding to Jonathan Chait's earlier article called "In Defense of Punching Left," which I'm sure you can
I read it. It's horrible. Yeah.
But I mean, like he takes on this book called Solidarity by Asher Taylor, who we've had on the show a bunch of times talking about student debt stuff.
She rules.
And a woman named, she's terrific. And a woman named Leah Hunt Hendricks, who is an heir to, I forget whose really large fortune, but she is a progressive who wants to use the money for good things instead of whatever, evil thing her ancestors did. And so they wrote this book together in which they take on people like Chait who always do left punching. And so Chait took this very personally and he wrote this response and he's talking about how, liberals are the adults in the room and they're more pragmatic and the left just doesn't understand. But what people like Chait fundamentally don't understand is that okay, there might be some leftist somewhere saying you've got to take the most maximalist position. But I think what I try to focus on, and I think what the Bernie movement tried to focus on, was the fact that there are all these enormously popular policies that could actually help people like Joe Biden win elections if they were willing to invest in them. But the reason why they don't support them is not because they think they're not popular, or they don't understand what a benefit it would be for their campaigns, but because they have another interest group that they're courting, and that is their billionaire base of donors. And they don't have the confidence that Bernie Sanders had to say, okay, I think I can out fundraise you with small dollar donations. And that is why they're always angling for the center, which is kind of economically conservative and socially liberal. But that's a quadrant of the XY axis of, kind of cultural beliefs and economic beliefs that is very underpopulated as compared to, I hate to say it, but it's true, people who are more economically progressive and socially conservative.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, the left punching thing, to me, it's like he kind of gets at this idea where, like you were saying, that being a centrist is pragmatic, but being a centrist, especially right now, is not pragmatic at all. Like the Biden administration's position on Gaza is extremely unpopular. It is costing him votes. It's not gaining him votes. The people that are most supportive of what he has, been doing will abandon him quickly. You see, every time he, even thinks about every time he even thinks about withholding weapons or something, you just see all these people being like, oh, he's Hamas, or it's not pragmatic at all to throw your lot in with people who want something that will, completely alienate the rest of your base. What would be pragmatic would be to set some limits with Netanyahu, maybe not completely cut off Israel, but say, hey, ceasefire or no more weapons from us at all. And guess what? We're going to make a big show of taking that money and solving the homelessness problem in the United States. Even centrists don't want all this war and chaos, and I don't know, I think even to moderate voters, this moderate voter, they're not happy about things seeming like they're in crisis all the time. That's a lot of what people liked about Biden.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about even choosing to frame it up as this money could be spent better elsewhere, and really making those war hawks justify why we should spend $1 billion on Israel rather than $1 billion on housing relief, or why you would spend the $3 billion a year, even before October 7th, that we spent on Israel, where everybody has universal health care and social programs the likes of which we can only dream of, when those same things aren't being provided for here. Another good point that you made is about how fickle these moderate voters are in the first place. This is again from the New York Times polling article from Monday. They write, Mr. Biden's losses are concentrated among moderate and conservative Democratic leading voters, who nonetheless think that the system needs major changes or to be torn down altogether. Mr. Trump wins just 2% of Mr. Biden. I don't know what these misters are about. Mr. Trump wins about just 2% of Mr. Biden's very liberal 2020 voters who think the system needs at least major changes, compared with 16% of those who are moderate or conservative. So the people who are fleeing this Biden coalition are the moderates. For whatever reason, I think that the left should flee and exercise some leverage, but never mind. Even though we get blamed for Democratic losses, we're not the ones that are fleeing in this situation. We're not the fickle ones. I think partly for the reasons you described, Kate, is that a lot of people are sincerely invested in abortion rights or trans rights or these other kinds of issues. Why not feed that base, especially since they work for you in all these other ways that you described: door knocking, getting the word out, etc.
Yeah, I think that there's from a Democratic Party perspective, and especially from a corporate donor of the Democratic Party perspective, there's no more dangerous precedent than making the left think that there is any way to get what they want. You know what I mean? Like it would be a crisis for them if like, you know, we protest and we win and they capitulate to us. Like that would be moral and that would be, you know, smart for winning elections. But I think that like, you know, having to do something like universal healthcare, you know, like ending the private insurance industry as you know, as you were all about, you know, in the Bernie campaign,
That's
like,
right.
you know, it would just be like they really do not want us to take away the lesson that there's anything that we can do to influence them at all.
Yeah. They're acting like the threat is more from us on the left than it is from the center or the right, despite trying to make the case that democracy is at stake because of Donald Trump. You're not acting like Donald Trump is the scariest thing. You're acting like we're the scariest thing.
It's like a new McCarthyism. Yeah.
Exactly. You know, which brings me to this question. News out today is that after much jockeying back and forth and a bunch of chest beating bravado from both Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump, there does seem to be an agreement coming together for them to have some kind of debate schedule. Biden wants the debates to happen earlier, at least one debate before the convention, which some folks are speculating is about him wanting to test the waters with regards to his performance and keeping the door open to then having a change of candidate at the DNC if he really screws the pooch. We should put in a clip for one of the Biden little ad challenging Donald Trump to a debate.
Donald Trump lost 2 debates to me in 2020. And since then, he hadn't shown up for debate. Now he's acting like he wants to debate me again. Well, make my day, pal. I'll even do it twice. So let's pick the dates, Donald. I hear you're free on Wednesdays.
But I wonder what you make of this theory that we still might actually get a different Democratic nominee.
I mean, I think that would be moral and I think it would be smart. And like, you know, like if they have the convention in Chicago as they had planned to, I know it's kind of up in the air with like Zoom. Like I plan on driving my ass to Chicago and protesting for the candidate, but I don't know. I don't see them actually doing it. Like, I think if there were truly massive outcry that included like liberals and centrists and like, you know, these like liberal pundits and I think if there were like a demand for him to retire that like went way beyond progressives and the left, I think it's possible. But like just with us, you know, by us I mean like the left, you know, like people who really you know, for the most part, like the Democratic Party like doesn't see as like their, you know, their moderate base or something. I don't know. I don't think there's any chance that he's going to do the smart thing here.
I mean, I love that you said retire like he's an old man stepping down. Like stepping down. But that's what the vibe is. But this is what's so ironic, Kate. It's like from the beginning, it was like 3/4 of Democratic voters who didn't want Biden to be the nominee, largely just because they thought he was too old. So it's not just the left. It's never just been the left. It's been a lot of people who, you know, have made Biden and Trump historically unfavorable candidates because they just didn't want a rematch. I mean, I think one of the most under-discussed aspects of that New York Times polling article is how many voters want this to be a change election. Like, oh, kills the priest. It's always that hope and change. Barack Obama. I had a friend at Current Affairs who used to say, I think it was Sparky, who's been on the show a bunch of times, Sparky Abraham, who once said, we were once debating whether like the candidate that wins is the more like, the word I'm coming up with like is Jesus-like, but that wasn't it. It was like a more prophetic, kind of revolutionary candidate. And that does seem to be the winner in every matchup. And in 2020, the fact that Trump was the incumbent made him necessarily seem like less of a change agent. He's literally the status quo choice. But now the roles are reversed, and it's very easy to see the outcome being largely dependent on that. So if it is about lots of people not wanting Biden to be the nominee, well, we already have that. I agree with you. I think it's unlikely unless he really just bungles the debate, like can't stand up, can't answer questions, just really tanks it. Then we'll see him maybe swapped out.
Well, so, you know, I mean, I completely agree with you that he should be swapped out, but like maybe I just have such little faith in the Democratic Party at this point that like I feel like he could bungle the debate. You could see Trump, demolishing him in the polls, like not even close. I mean, it's already getting there in some.
It's already happening.
Yeah, but I don't know. He's just so stubborn. And also, like there's been this phenomenon too of just like all these articles of like you shouldn't believe the polls. Like Democrats, like they don't believe the polls anymore. And actually, like Jonathan Chait, who we're talking about, like he almost never has good opinions, but he did have an okay opinion on this issue. He wrote a piece a few weeks back that was like, honestly, like most of the time polling is pretty indicative, and there have been exceptions. They've made improvements to polling, since like really inaccurate polls. And I don't know, there's just this kind of emperor's new clothes kind of thing that's very frustrating. Like if you see kind of all the, K-hive type Democrats, like it's all just like, don't believe the polls, don't believe the polls. I think Fareed Zakaria was like talking recently, like he was kind of on a soapbox about like, no guys, I think that we should believe the polls, but whatever made him say that is like the fact that it's very popular not to at this point. And it's just I think that if we saw Joe Biden getting 10% of the vote in swing states, people would just say it's like a polling error and then, be like shocked.
Yeah. I mean, but there's different people, right? Like I understand why people say, okay, Joe Biden is very stubborn. What are you going to do? He's got to make the decision and he is hubristic. There's this Axios. Oh, well, it was reported all over the place, but I'm reading from Axios. Biden's polling denial, why he doesn't believe he's behind. Reportedly, people close to him are saying that he doesn't think the polls are reflective of reality, which I think is especially disconcerting. But at the same time, I wonder if the debate is almost a tool to prove to Biden that he should reconsider. Like it's not even to us. We already know that this is not looking good for him. I saw Peter Beinart resurfacing the Ezra Klein take from a month or two ago, saying that they needed to pick a new candidate at the convention. I mean, like everyone, we're all there. Like the American public is there. But maybe the debate is the case to like take to Biden, like, do you see what you look like on this stage? Do you see what the poll numbers are coming out of this debate? Please, sir, like reconsider.
Yeah, I hope that you're right. Like I don't know, but that would be great because I do think that Trump is not a good president. I do believe that he and his cronies, I guess, are a lot more organized than last time. Like part of the only reason we were saved from Trump's worst last time is because he's so ineffective. And I know that like the Heritage Foundation and the entire Republican establishment like has put a lot of time and effort into thinking about how to avoid those same mistakes and like run a tighter ship than last time. And I don't think it is fair for the Democratic Party to just like abandon us to a Trump presidency. I really do think that given the choice is Trump and Biden is such a spectacular disaster that they really owe us another candidate at this point.
Yeah, and it is negligence. I wanted to say earlier when you were talking about people making different kinds of political choices, whether to vote for Biden or not, and a sincere and good faith desire to protect various interest groups that most certainly are going to come under the microscope and be targeted under Trump. What frustrates me about that is not that it's wrong, but that it is a choice that has been made by the Democratic Party to pit those various constituency groups against each other instead of doing the thing it could do, which is to accommodate all of those constituency groups, because the interest that those groups, there's a lot of interest that those groups share that often come under an economic umbrella. And many people who might have, feelings about, oh, I'm not that, but I'm this, and are these people getting one over me? If you actually provide something for everyone, people are much less likely to feel like they are being sidelined for the interest of another group, and the way that becomes factional and makes it difficult to hold together a coalition. If you're going to be the Democrats and you're going to say we're a big tent party and we're going to have all these coalitions, I don't buy the rhetoric that says it's just more difficult for Democrats to coalition build. I think that there's a choice that's made to try to say, all of you old people that used to be a part of the coalition for a long time, whether it's Black people or people who are interested in voting rights or women or whatever, you just got to stick the landing and stay with us, because now there are these newer groups that are under threat, trans people, immigrants, what have you. And so you just got to forget about your concerns for this new group. That is factional. That is a problem. That is creating hate even within the Democratic Party that is completely unnecessary, because it's not as though they can't put together a program that satisfies all those interests and needs. And I resent being told that I'm the one who's jeopardizing the interest of the newer marginalized group and expected to swallow the shit that my community has been put through since before the founding of this country, because the Democratic Party chooses to frame it as an us versus them scenario.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. And I think that what the Democratic Party is doing right now is likely to break the fragile coalition, not only now but for a long time to come. I don't know. I mean, like the people like Jonathan Chait or whatever, like he doesn't have anything. Like there's zero shared values with like somebody who considers themselves a progressive at this point. Like there's nothing that Jonathan Chait and a progressive that want to happen on any issue that is the same. There's nothing. And it doesn't make sense to have it be one party anymore.
That's what's so crazy with this article. Okay, can you indulge me? I know you read it, but for listeners who haven't and who might be wondering why like I'm harping on it so much and like chose to write a radar about it today. This thing, it's wild. So he starts saying, I'm a liberal. I've always been a liberal. When I began my career in the mid-90s, I very rarely criticized the left because there wasn't much of a left to speak of. Left-wing ideas, by which I mean left of liberal, are now in wider circulation and have significantly more influence in politics and intellectual life than they ever did. So like right off the bat, I'm like, definitionally, we're going to have some problems here. I suspect he's not going to be able to understand the difference between liberals and leftism, and how bizarre for him to say, well, the leftists aren't very powerful. They've never really been powerful. Now they're marginally more powerful. So let me take a big swing and punch left. Then he accurately quotes the Solidarity book, the Astor Taylor, Leah Hunt Hendricks book. And what he quotes of their book, I think, sounds like spot on. It's a criticism you and I and a million other leftists have made a million times about the difference between liberals and leftists. They write, this is from the good book, Solidarity. They write, too often, liberals seek to legitimize their positions by punching left, distancing themselves from social movements to make themselves appear reasonable by comparison, which only strengthens the hands of conservatives and pulls the political center to the right. Check.
Yeah.
No lies detected, insightful.
Undeniable, I think,
And yet we have a denial.
Yeah.
Chait goes on to say, like, he doesn't really squarely address that criticism, right? It's not about you're not allowed to criticize other people. No, that's not what these authors are saying. What they're saying is your criticisms are empty. They're not substantive. They're about making you seem more virtuous and serious and not about actually any qualms that you have with our position. But here's what Chait says. He says, notably, while they urge liberals not to criticize the left, they do not make any similar demand that leftists withhold criticism of liberalism. Good things are good and bad things are bad.
It's also like so immature. It's like I know you are, but what am I? It's also like the left is criticized all the time. It's been like one of the kind of like there was literally a whole movement to put people on lists for being on the left. It's not like punching left is a new thing.
It's new, right?
But it's like in Astor Taylor and the other author's book, I'm sorry, I forgot their name, but like when I was reading that article, it's like I was reminded of how many kind of centrist Democrats right now, are saying things like, oh, like we don't actually need the left to win. We're just gonna pick up, Nikki Haley voters. And it's like, I doubt there's enough Nikki Haley voters. Let's say there are though. now your Democratic Party coalition depends on the votes of people who are anti-abortion and who are anti-trans, and like, you know, like for all of your, you know, all of these kind of centrist like concerns, these fake concern, I think in a lot of cases for something like trans rights, like it's just obviously worse to need the votes of people who are transphobic, and that's a political priority.
Right. And that's how you get the ratcheting right. Like, he denies the idea that his politics, his kind of like sensible, reasonable man's politics, is exactly why the Democratic Party has moved to the right, chasing the Republican Party to the right, pretending like if it offers like a Republican light version of Republicans, people who are ideologically aligned with them would choose the light version rather than the real thing that's right there. So he does this whole like, well, why can't, you know, you can criticize me and I can criticize you thing. And I think that's partly also reflective of the fact that he has no sense of what the power dynamics are here. He kind of acknowledges up front, leftists don't really have that much power, but sees it as equivalent for someone like Asher Taylor and Leah Hunt Hendricks to write a book about, hey, like, how about we have some solidarity here? Yeah. As though the liberals and centrists aren't in control of two major parties, denying debates to third-party candidates and all those kinds of things. And he exposes himself later on when he criticizes the left for having basically a power analysis. He says, one important distinction between the two tendencies is that liberals tend to understand policy as a search for truth and politics as a struggle to bring a majority around to their position, while leftists understand politics as a conflict to mobilize the political willpower to implement objective interests of the oppressed. Then he quotes Taylor and Hicks. Some see politics as a game of persuasion, not a power struggle, Taylor and Hunt Hendricks write critically. This optimistic view ignores the fact that those with power and motivated by self-interest, including the vast majority of the Republican Party operatives and their private sector allies, have little interest in dialogue, let alone compromise. And they're right. Hunt Hendricks and Asher Taylor are saying, oh, yeah, what's driving these parties to make decisions is power, it's money, it's lobbying, it's all of these other kinds of things. And that puts a limit on our persuasive ability when we're talking about the power holders, the stakeholders, as opposed to the persuasion that can happen with like individual voters. But when we're persuading individual voters by knocking doors, we have to be cognizant of the fact that we're up against these much larger mechanisms that are persuading them in other directions. And yes, it is not the same thing for me to be attacking lobbying groups as it is for you to be attacking two young ladies who wrote a book about solidarity.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it is like, it's kind of like what we were talking about with Jerry Seinfeld at the beginning. Yeah. Where it's like these people feel very victimized by people who are not really victimizing them. Like Jonathan Chait, a bunch of these other like liberal pundits, you know, like it's just kind of the centrist pundits, and even like, you know, some of the people that are kind of like running for office on like, I'm an alternative to the left, like the Will Stancil types or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like they have like some kind of complex that I think it like honestly like psychologically results from themselves like not being cool or having people think that they're loser cool. Fetish. Yeah, they like they're not satisfied that their side has all the power, will for the foreseeable future. Like they really want the respect of tastemakers, of young people, you know, of people that are I don't know. It's just they wish that they could have like people just think they're cool. I think it really is that simple. And it's like, that's the one thing we have the power to withhold.
I'm going to call this the serious man problem, and no disrespect to the Coen brothers. Yeah. Like, it feels like, and I saw a lot of this creeping into even parts of the left that I once felt a lot of solidarity with and affection for after Bernie's 2020 loss, but there's almost like this embarrassment that we believed in something and then we lost, and now we have to like justify our belief in this thing. It's like you're so afraid of being a loser, as though the fact of having lost in the short term invalidates the morals that underwrote your choice to support someone like Bernie or have your politics in the first place, that you just flee the scene and you focus on other things, or you start to say, well, I got to be a serious man and I got to just look at the polls. And then Nate Silver tells me that this is the line that I have to trot to win. And the squad is just doing what they have to do to win. And they have a long game, and trust me. even that gets disproven. When Biden loses, when Hillary Clinton loses, when Democrats lose, there's no crisis of confidence that says, okay, I guess the Democratic Party has to regroup. No, they just keep doing the same thing. We're literally having the same rematch as 2020. And Hillary Clinton is literally out here left punching and sounding exactly like she did in 2016.
Yeah. I think that you make a good point, which is, there are people that they really don't like losing. And it's like to be a leftist, and I'm saying leftist on purpose because I think this could include, people of many different tendencies and persuasions, but just, to be left of the Democratic Party, left of even, the progressive side of it, like AOC, like we're going to lose again and again and again. Like tearing down the military industrial complex is harder than getting a $300 tax credit. Like, doesn't mean that the $300 tax credit for families is bad or anything like that. And, but it's like, if you want radical change, then yeah, you're going to lose more often, probably 99% of the time. But, I still think that, that it's worth it because it's what's happening in the world right now, like climate change alone. Like, do you want to say you didn't try? Like, do you really want to say you didn't try to stop this horrible assault on Gaza, this genocide? Like, I don't know. To me, like the centrist position a lot of the time is, it's like amoral. It's bankrupt, and it's like, yeah, so, cool. Banks agree with you. Amazing. Like, why does that make you feel good? So
yes, and it's not practical because people aren't banks and you need people to vote for you. And it's not practical to ignore how popular wealth tax is and how popular Medicare for All is and say you're going to veto that policy when you're losing in the swing states where those policies are popular. So I know I'm ranting. If you want more details and more of a rant about how I feel about this particular article, you can check out the Radar that I did on Wednesday that does a deep dive into this and this weird liberal fetish about punching left. It does seem like it's punching left season. It's open season. Bad polls for Democrats mean one thing, that people take out their weapons and start targeting the left for blame. So I'm sure we'll see a lot more of that. Kate, I really appreciate you coming on the show today, engaging with me, giving me a little bit of levity. I've very much needed it. Tell the audience where they can find more levity by watching your actual comedy show on Netflix and beyond.
Okay, so my new special is out on Amazon, on Apple TV, and on YouTube. So you can find it any of those places. I do have an older special on Netflix. Check out that one too. But the new one is on Amazon, Apple TV, and YouTube. It's called Loopholes. And in terms of like following me on social media, I'm Kate.Willett on Instagram, 2 L's and 2 T's and Willett. That's where I post all my shows. I tour all the time. So I'm probably coming to your city soon. And on Twitter, I am Kate Willett, just no dot or anything like that. I am going to plug briefly. There's a project that a lot of comedians and influencers are doing right now called Pass the Hat, where like each comic or artist is paired with like a family in Gaza that's trying to raise funds. And I'm doing that. I have the GoFundMe linked on my Twitter. It's a family, 10 people, a mom, her 6 daughters, two grandmothers and her husband trying to evacuate, really need medical help. So, if you do have, $5 or $10, that would be an amazing place to put it. And I'd super appreciate it. But yeah, no, this has been a pleasure. Please check out my special. There's a lot of dick jokes. It's not so serious. So if you need that, yeah. But I got an abolitionist and leftist message in there a little bit, Yeah.
Well done. Please do go listen to Kate. I sincerely, genuinely think you're funny. I follow you on Instagram and just LOL, you're really my vibe. So I hope people do go and watch you and support your family, the Gazan family, if they can. Thanks again, Kate. I really look forward to talking to you again on here soon.
Okay. Thank you so much, Brie. I really appreciate it.
All right, to all you faithful listeners, thank you for supporting this podcast. If you want an additional dose of bad faith every week, you know you can go to patreon.com/badfaithpodcast and subscribe for an additional Monday episode, and also get access to all of the back episodes, now numbering in the hundreds, because I have been doing this now for going on 3 years. So thank you all for your support. Take care of yourselves, and as always, keep the faith. Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you, and as always, keep the faith.